Since I first presented my three-stage model of psychospiritual development, many people have referenced the second stage and asked me, am I in the second stage, or how close am I to the second stage? This is because, just to fill you in if you're not familiar, the first stage is really defined by a willingness to engage in self-exploration through inner work, meditation, therapy, counselling, but in a serious manner in order to release oneself from the limitations of personality and character. So that's a long discussion, but and that's available in several of my books, particularly Your Essential Self, if you're interested, which gives some detail into what then takes place to release yourself from those limitations. But inevitably we are interested in what is further, or what can I become, or have I made it, or this idea of progress. Perhaps I should just say that it's terribly important in inner work of any kind. I suggest, if it's going to be effective, that you be involved in what's happening in the process of what's going on, rather than moving towards progress all the time, or rather taking a perspective which is progressive. There will undoubtedly be progress made if you are earnest in your dedication to your practice. There's no question about that, but the need to make progress itself should be, so to speak, put out on the table. It's material to work with. It's grist for the mill, rather than I was going to say a required attitude, but I mean really the right attitude, because that also has to be an object of awareness. It's not the stance, the posture, or the attitude that will bring you through the first stage, or even allow you to make substantial progress. So, that aside, we're talking about the people who are interested in, hey, am I in the second stage of awakening yet? Or how far am I from it, and all of this, and what happens, how would I know when? And I'm writing about this at the moment for the second level of the Sacred Attention Therapy online training, which you can reference in the Centre for Human Awakening website underneath. So it's a long discussion. It's not a soundbite discussion, but I'll do my best just to sketch it in. I think the second stage of awakening is characterized by a certain destabilizing, a certain kind of, where am I, what's happened, what's different, a sense of change without being able to nail it down, to say exactly what's happened. This is a product perhaps of the lack of self-consciousness which is necessary to move from first to second stage, because you're changing your human center from the childhood ego self to this inner, deeper development through adolescence and adulthood, where you refined a sense of self-identification. It became just as bound to the ego, but it's actually different. The sense of self you have when you were 3 is not the sense of yourself you have when you're 44, clearly. So you've now moved into a different echelon of ego, and in the way of sacred attention we don't talk about ego transcendence in one huge gulp. What we do is we talk about the psychological work of releasing the egoic trappings of limitation from childhood, and then we go on to take it in bite-sized chunks after that as well. In other words, ego, insofar as it may be anything other than an illusion, which it isn't, can be seen as the dream of layers or echelons of covering of the truth, or veils, if you will. So one of these has been shed, and it's the first time it's ever happened when the that person enters the second stage of awakening. So you see the disorientation, but the inner strength is inevitably enough to hold some security, in the sense of being able to persist in your roles in the world, and your sense of day and night and morning and evening, and carrying on with life as it usually is. There can be, with some people, depending on their predisposition, a kind of woohoo, hey, this great thing that's happened. There's no question about that. It is a revolution in awareness, a revolution in consciousness. And people, as they become aware of it and see that they are relatively unbound, are able to feel great elation. But as a therapist working with people in the early stages of second stage awakening, what I advise is a process of assimilation through stabilization and integration. And what all those ION words really mean is that you allow the new insights to become a part of you in your center and in your living your life, that you integrate them into the psyche, and through the psyche out into the world and into your everyday life. And if that's the integration part of assimilating the change, the second is the stabilization part. Through the integration, what's happening energetically in the body, emotionally, mentally and physically, is a realignment. And so time needs to be taken, perhaps concern with diet, perhaps with exercise, perhaps with spiritual exercises, perhaps with particularly holistic exercises which are going to be relevant to these different facets of the human organism, in order to stabilize in the new changes. It's not far that you've come. The center was slightly off, you might say, but slightly off is off, and you have been living perhaps for many years out of true. And so as you enter the second stage, this is the beginning of your relating to the world and being with yourself out of your true nature. And some people have said to me, well, why should this be, and how, if you call that the true nature, what went wrong? This is a very long discussion too, and maybe we don't know what went wrong, maybe nothing went wrong. The fact is that today in the 21st century we've got a crisis. It's a spiritual crisis, there's also a world crisis, there's a economic crises, certainly international crises, and all the rest of it. But for me, from my perspective, and for those of us who are concerned with the inner world and the inner life and its relationship to the appearance of the world around us, this becomes absolutely critical. If we are true inside ourselves and we concern ourselves with the inner ecology, then we believe, or at least many people that I know and work with get the message, that the world is a projection of our own inner states, and so collectively our collective world turns out to be created by our own internal forms. This is what makes inner work so incredibly important, and this movement into the second stage of awakening so significant. If you'd like to know more about second stage awakening, if I've left you behind with this jargonese and so on, please look at my book Your Essential Self. You can get it on Amazon and all the rest of the places. You can get it in Kindle for not very much, and have a look and see if it makes some sense to you, and if you're interested in pursuing inner work.